United, glory, glory, Man United, as the Reds go marching on. M-U-F, M-U-F-C, okay, M-U-F, M-U-F-C, okay.
Joe Glanville has supported Manchester United since the 1950s. Well known within our global fan base, he's a living legend. He's enjoyed friendships with so many of this football club's biggest names. From Busby to Ferguson, from Best Law and Charlton to David Beckham. His personal memories truly provide a unique insight. For any supporter who wants to know about the history of our football club, this is a series not to be missed. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of an exclusive 4-part series with the famous Joseph Glanville, the former president of the world's oldest Manchester United supporters club. To those of us who love and respect him, he's Sir Joe. He's got so many great stories about our beloved football club, a personal friend of so many of our heroes. I'd like to thank you very much, Joe Glanville, for giving us such precious memories about our football club. To kick us off, please tell us a little bit more about who is the real Joe Glanville.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. That's a great opportunity, and it's something that I hope I will treasure for the rest of my life. I've always been a football lover. I mean, even at college, I never had a nickname, but I've always been referred to as Glanville of Man United, as if Man United owes me. It was always something that it gave me great satisfaction, because at the end of the day, they referred to me with contacts with one of the greatest clubs in the world, who is Manchester United. So I had great times over here, and it gave me a lot of opportunities, in my life. And I always refer to my contacts that they have given me a wonderful life, because this place, it's always been something to be connected with, something very, very special.
Do you remember the first time you heard about Manchester United Football Club?
The thing is that I came to know of Man United when I was 12 years of age. I am today 78 years, and in a few months I will be 79. And in the early 50s, we began to read, with the limitations we had at home, of this great club, And then, in the mid-50s, I came to be more interested, because, as always happens, kids try to support the team who's on top. That's been the history of football. It was the first time that television was introduced in Malta, black and white, And at that time, it was only about 12 years after the last World War. Money was not easy. In fact, Malta was hit, bombarded by the Germans and the Italians, and the island was absolutely hammered. So after 10 years, the country was coming back bit by bit, and people could not afford televisions. So most of the people, if they wanted to watch something on the telly, they used to go to the local clubs. And it went on that the first cup final ever shown on television was the one in 1957, where United were playing Aston Villa. And even up to today, when you mention to me the word McParland and Lofthouse, I am not happy about it at all. Because they were the two people who I think made us lose 2 consecutive cup finals, And then Munich came, and I still refer to myself, not Joe of Man United, I refer to me as a Munich fan. Because after Munich, I got hooked up with the team, and it continued to develop year after year,
Romantic times, really, to watch a football club from so far away. It must have seemed like it almost wasn't real, but you talked about the 57 Cup final, and then 1961 it became a little bit more real, because you had a visit from the Manchester United football team.
After Munich, the local supporters club was formed in 1959, which was exactly a year after Munich, and the club was formed really through what happened in Munich, you know. And the local people at Old Trafford, especially Matt Busby, was so impressed that after just 2 years, he sent United 11 to play a League 11 in Malta, you know. And that was the real start, the first time I saw United in action, you know. And Munich gave Man United a different image of the club, because after Munich, Manchester United became worldwide. I still remember the place, exactly the place where I watched the game in 1961, you know. They had a visit of about 4 or 5 days. The local supporters club organized a nice reception to what was then their limitation. And Busby was continued to be impressed by our support.
Mark Busby was always very forward-thinking, wasn't he? He wanted to be the first at everything, and I got the impression he really liked the idea of Manchester United having a supporters club in Malta. So when we move on now, we go to 1963 FA Cup final.
Yeah.
By that time, United was still searching for a trophy after Munich, so it's 5 years on, and it was the beginning of the swinging 60s.
Yes.
What do you remember of the 63 FA Cup final?
First of all, the image of Manchester United continued to enhance itself when they signed Dennis Law. So that meant they meant business, you know. And in fact, although in 1963 they had a bad season league-wise, they managed to get to the cup final against Leicester. And that was the first time I watched United in action away from home after 1961. And after the game, I sent a congratulating message to Matt Busby, and I was so proud that he sent me a thank you note after, signed by him, and I still got it at home.
Fabulous. I know you had a good relationship as well with Les Olive. I think he probably helped you with a few tickets, did he?
Les Olive, as Matt, was very impressed that we got a club in Malta. And whatever I asked him, he was very cooperative, you know, with everything, you know. And it's a funny story that how I met Les Olive, you know. Les Olive was a very straightforward person, so if he asked for something, he meant business. And at that time, he had a very close friend from Manchester, a well-known figure by the name of Joe Pullen. Joe had the biggest nightclub in Manchester, in Petricraft, and this bloke decided to come for a holiday to Malta. And being so close to Les Olive, because they were the best men in each other's wedding, he wrote to me, Les Olive, and he told me, would you mind, a friend of mine is coming to Malta, and I would like you to meet him and look after him. Which I did, came to Malta. He turned out to be a fantastic bloke. I introduced him to my family, and before I left Malta, I told my dad, the next time I am available, I will take your son to watch Manchester United and see the setup at Old Trafford. And that was great news to me. And I was waiting month after month when I was going to get the phone call, and Joe would tell me, come over, you know.
Okay. So I've got here a message about 1967. Was that the first time you came to Manchester to watch United in the flesh?
I mean, in 1966, when there was the World Cup, Joe Pullen told me, the next step is that I would ask you the date when you come to Manchester. And in 67, it was about March, April, I arrived in Manchester. It was Manchester as I used to know it, all black with suit. It was a totally different Manchester to what we know today. And on the way home to Joe's house, because he kept me at his home for a month and a half, we passed through Manchester, and I told him, you're going to take me to the club. He told me, how do you know? I told him, because I'm noticing the 2 chimneys at the back on the Manchester, you know. And with my connections with Joe, and then his connections with Les Olive, I was really welcomed. And I met after I met him in Malta, and he was very, very happy. He looked after me for all the time I was in Manchester, you know. He took me with the team to various matches on the coach. We used to meet at a place used to be called the David Hume Golf Club, where all the players used to gather over there, have lunch, and then on to the games, away games, you know. And the first game I saw of all the games was against Liverpool in Anfield. And I remember he told Sheikh Brennan, look after this kid. And of all the stadium, where does he give us the 2 tickets? We were welcomed with big boobs. It was next to the Kop. But Sheikh looked after me, and then going back home after the game, Matt made sure that I will go home, because I did not know Manchester, and he asked the coach driver, listen, make sure that he arrives home. Matt was always like that. He was always helpful with everybody. And that was it. And then I spent a month and a half, as I said. I watched various home and away games. And I began to get used to the setup, here especially, the cliff. And it was the first of hundreds of visits to Manchester.
Fantastic.
In my whole life.
The football club is so big now in terms of numbers of people, but clearly in those days it was quite a small club in terms of the staff. But it seems to me that you were very much welcomed as part of the Manchester United family from day one, really. You made yourself at home, and I guess you spent a lot of time here at the Cliff as well. Tell us about the memories of the Cliff.
What really happened was that I came to know a person whom I considered my second father, Jack Carrington. Jack was a fantastic bloke. And the first few years that I came over, he used to accommodate me at his home. So that was a great opportunity because he was working here. So every morning we used to come here for a whole day. Sometimes I used to stay at the Cliff till 9 o'clock, even watching the young elements of the club. And after that, over here, I became known with all the stuff. There used to be the caretaker of the place, Bill Watts. Became good friends of mine who used to visit Malta year after year and was always my guest at home. Then at that time, it's amazing to remember that at that time, the coaching staff that there were over here were about 4. It was Jack Carrington, Wilf McGuinness, John Aston Sr., the father of John Aston, and then there was another bloke, we used to call him, his name was Jones, but we used to know him as Jonah. So through that, I came to know even the people who used to look after the pitch, Peter Solsky, and sometimes with him working over here, and he had a bit of a tough job, we used to get the 2 brothers, Royal, who used to look after the pitch at Old Trafford. So that began long big connections with the Cliff. I always used to, every time I used to come to Manchester, the Cliff was my residence. I used to go home to sleep every day, and in the morning, first thing, with a taxi from here. Because even breakfast, I used to take it at the Cliff.
You didn't have a bed anywhere, did you?
No.
Obviously, I don't think there's anybody alive probably who knows the Cliff better than you do, but you're here today. I'm just wondering, how much has it changed since you first came here?
The first time that I came here, there was not even the indoor pitch. It was just a basic place where there was a small eating place. The kitchen was run by a woman called Teresa. She used to come from Stockport. And there was, I remember, there was to drink in the canteen was a huge container of milk. Everybody drinking milk. And the setup at the Cliff at that time was this eating area. Then there was the manager's office. Then there was the coach's office with the showers, and that was my place. It was the sort of indoor place where we used to discuss football between the coaches, you know. And then on the other side, there was a small room used by the physio. And when you go down, there was a small gym, very, very small, not in comparison to what there is in Carrington, you know. And further down, there were 2 dressing rooms, one for the first team, and the other one for the Central League, which were the reserves. And underneath the steps, there were a very, very small room, which used to be the boot room, where they used to polish the boots of the players, which at that time, the youngsters used to do it. It was part of their education, not like today. And they used to wash the cars of the players of the first team, which was part of their education, which today, unfortunately, does not exist, because that was part of their formation, also of their character, you know.
Yeah. Well, did they have a nickname in those days? I mean, did they call you Sir Joe? Or
No,
did they call you
no,
Mr.
no,
Malta?
no. I over here, through Billy Watts, I used to be known as Joe from Malta. In fact, I used to call this caretaker, Billy Watts, the tourist office, the Malta tourist office at the cliff, because every time he used to return back from Malta after holidays, he used to begin to jot, cross on the calendar, 135 days, 134 days. So, and he was a great advert to the club and to Malta. And through him, we managed to introduce a lot of players, because when they came the first time, they were impressed, especially with our welcome, and that gave us a good stepping stone to the future, which today, with all due respects to the people of the club, most of the players come back with great experiences, you know.
Fabulous. Because this is a team effort, I've got questions here as well from the committee, from Joseph Tedesco and his people. They want to remind me to make sure I get all the questions right. So one of the things they've asked me to ask you is that you've mentioned some of the guys that you became friendly with, some of the behind-the-scenes guys. What about the Manchester United Hall of Fame, the managers, the players? Who are the people that we know about, the fans will know about, that you became close to, that you haven't mentioned already?
I mean, in all due respects, I mean, at the time of Bobby, George, and Dennis, first of all, in my youth, my favorite player used to be Bobby Charlton, for one simple reason, because Bobby was very professional in his work, always a great example, you know. So Bobby was my hero for me, you know. George and Dennis, whom I knew very well. In fact, I even used to go to George's place in Bramhall when he moved from Diggs to, we used to call his house the Loo, for one simple reason, because it was a nice house, but it was all tiled. So we used to refer to it as the Loo. But inside it was a fantastic place. I used to go to his house quite a lot, playing pool or billiards, you know. He was a fantastic bloke, George. Dennis was always Dennis, a great player, fantastic player. And when he moved here, before he used to play for Torino. So at that time, he always referred to me as Giuseppe. And great friendship with Dennis. I still am in contact with him, although lately, health-wise, he's not at his best. So these days, when I ask about him, I normally refer to Mr. Wardle, who I know visit him nearly every week.
Yeah, they're almost neighbours, aren't they?
Yes.
Some of the great footage that we've seen of the cliff, and I always think of you when I see it. George Best, he sort of dribbled around everybody, and they couldn't stop him, could they? He was like watching George Best train. It was special, wasn't it?
George, besides what I used to witness on the football pitch, I always say the best of George was here. Because what he used to do with his feet was not something that you teach it. It came from him. I always think that George was the greatest player I ever saw in my life. And training here was the biggest pleasure. For instance, there were many instances when the ball used to be glued to his feet. And then you get Bobby Charlton swearing at him because he's not passing the ball. And then Bobby turns his eyes and he sees the ball in the net. So he had to close his mouth. But this went on frequently, with arguments between George and Bobby, of George not letting the ball out of his feet.
Glory, glory, Man United! Glory, glory, Man United! As the Reds go marching on!
So, Joseph, I guess it's changed quite a lot since the first time that you came here.
Of course, at the end, one of the main reasons why they moved to Carrington was because the place had become too concise for the requirements of the team as the years passed and the teams developed, In fact, the place where we are here today did not even exist. The first few years that I came over, the indoor pitch was not there. It was just a piece of land. And I do consider it was a very, very wise decision, because through that they could expand, especially in the youth section. Because the cliff in the olden days, there was only the main pitch, and then on the far side, there used to be a very, very small pitch where the youngsters used to train, And through the expansion of the youth systems and whatnot, I came to know later on two people over here who used to work here, who were Brian Whitehouse and Eric Harrison. Two coaches which became very, very close to me. And at the end, they came so close to me that I began going with them for reserve team games and youth team games. And I used to go on the coach, help them, both on the coach and giving sandwiches to the players, as well in the dressing room, preparing before the game, jerseys, shorts, and all the lot, And I came so very close to them that one particular cup final, which was the great year of 1999, when the invitations arrived for them to go to Wembley, Eric Harrison, instead of offering his wife to join him for the weekend, I took her place, which was something that was so special, because we came from Malta on the Friday, and as soon as we arrived in Heathrow, I came to Manchester on train, where I knew that the next day I was back in London. But I was traveling with the official party, And I came to London for the final. I stayed with the whole United parents and players' relatives at the Royal Lancaster. I attended the after-dinner celebrations, which were restricted because the Champions League Cup final against Barcelona was coming 5 days later. And after the weekend in London, we proceeded with the families of players and officials straight to Barcelona for that fantastic final. So the youth team section of the club gave me another opportunity to come close to the section that the coaches that were in the section of the youth system.
So you had good links with the youth players, but it's not surprising because it sounds like you were very much an integral part of the Manchester United setup, the whole family, the team, right up to the managers. So I'm guessing you had very strong connections and relationships with the managers as well.
Of course, yes, because if there weren't good connections with the managers, I would not have the opportunities to be here day in, day out, If I had to begin with the managers whom I met, first of all, met Busby and his assistant Jimmy Murphy. Two great people who definitely are an integral part of the history of Manchester United. And they were so close to me that up to this very day, like yesterday, we were drinking with the members of Jimmy Murphy's family, his son Nick and his other relations, you know. And Matt Busby was, for me, he was the greatest manager we ever had. With all due respects to Fergie, who won more than Matt did, but the situation when Matt took the club over, it was totally different. Because he came to Manchester at the end of the last World War, where a lot of the players were still serving in the army or whatever, and he did not know who was coming back, or else who was going to be killed during the war. So he did not have a clue what squad he was going to have. And then in the meantime, Old Trafford was totally bombed. It was wrecked, totally wrecked. And in fact, it was wrecked so much that you see photos of the stadium at that time, that even a tree grew in the middle of the pitch, which was very a surprise thing. But that gives you the situation of the club that he had. And then after the war, unfortunately, what happened in Munich, he lost what I can describe, some fantastic great players, with the one you just mentioned, Duncan Edwards, besides Roger Byrne. And at the time, if they had survived, there was the World Cup in Sweden after, where Harry Gregg was voted the best goalkeeper in the tournament, and the England team had definitely 3 players of that crash, which were Roger Byrne, Duncan Edwards, and Tommy Taylor, besides other players on the fringe of being called for England. So Busby faced a lot of problems to get the club on his feet, which later happened in 1960 when he managed to win the European Cup for the first time. So that was Busby and Jimmy Murphy, and my respect to all these 2 people. It goes on every day, every time I come to Manchester, because I make it a point, if possible, to go and visit them in their resting place. So, I mean, that's the respect, how much I've got for the 2 people.
It's interesting that you say that Matt Busby was the greatest manager, because for us older fans, he was the man that made Manchester United great. But I think people will be interested, because you'd have seen firsthand the relationship between Matt Busby and Jimmy Murphy, because it was very much a 2-man team, wasn't it? I mean, yes. Busby was the man at the front, yes. But Jimmy Murphy was absolutely crucial.
Jimmy Murphy, all the youngsters were in Jimmy Murphy's hand. He used to be very tough with the players. But at the same time, outside the pitch, they were his great part of the family, you know. And you find a lot of people at that time, players, who tells you, if it wasn't for Jimmy Murphy, I wouldn't have made the first team. That's why even the players that came to be known as the Busby Babes, the first stage of their career was under Jimmy Murphy. Great person, very, very great person.
So it must have been quite emotional for you to see the unveiling of the statue.
Yes, in fact, we were invited by the family to come. We were a group from Malta of about 12, 14 people. And it was great to see at the very end that they managed to get a statue and over there. And one of the people who worked for the statue today is here with us. Mr. Mulholland, he really pushed so that the statue is there. And I take this opportunity to thank him for the great idea I had to try and get people involved for the statue. Because Jimmy Murphy was an integral part of the history of Manchester United.
It's important having the statue there because it helps people ask questions, and the younger people who won't remember Jimmy Murphy or even know about Munich, some of them. But it's good that we've got the statue there because people can ask the questions, and it's great to see him recognised, isn't it?
Yes, 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 of course, because even Jimmy, in a way, he was lucky, because he was supposed to be part of the contingent which went to Belgrade. But at that time, he was manager of Wales, and he had a commitment. They were playing a game, and although he wanted to go, Ms. Busby told him, no, you go and look after the national team. If it wasn't the case, he would definitely have been with the United Party, which travelled to Belgrade.
Absolutely. So Jimmy Murphy kept the football club going, and then after the Busby era, tell us how you fitted in then, and who are the people that you remembered after Busby and Murphy?
I mean, the other managers, because after Busby, I think it was Wilf McGuinness. He was manager for the first team for about a couple of years. Another person, an integral part of the history of Manchester United, not just Wilf, or his whole family. Unfortunately, Wilf was training with players with whom he used to play. So I think it was a bit of a difficult situation for him to be successful. And at the end, I mean, I think Matt Busby, who proposed him to be as manager, was not happy when he was sacked, because the way I see it, it was a bit of a failure of Busby choosing Wilf. But Wilf was a great personality at Old Trafford, because he used to be a player, very close to the Busby babes, and he was always also lucky to have missed Munich, because he was supposed to be part of the party which travelled to Belgrade. Then after, he became a coach at the club, and then he was appointed as manager, and after he left the club for a while, but he was back again, and after that, Paul, his son, became part of the setup at Old Trafford, where he was a player, a coach, and at the end he finished as the person in charge of the academies. Unfortunately, and then it's a very sad situation, when I remember that he was sacked when the Glazers arrived, and I don't think he deserved it, because it was his family setup which meant Manchester United. And I think he managed to produce quite a few youngsters, like Norman Whiteside, besides others, that he deserved not to be, but not to be sacked. But the situation began to change, and the Glazers had ideas that anybody who is part and parcel of the history of Manchester United being employed at the club was not their idea. That's the way I feel. That's what went on.
I know a lot of people. I mean, we had an evening with Nicky Butt a couple of weeks ago, and he said exactly the same thing. He said what made United great for him was the fact that we had this history and we had this template, and they all had. There's like a Bible somewhere here at the Cliff where they have all the records, and this is what we're looking for in a fullback like Roger Byrne, and they're trying to move away from it.
In fact, one of the main things that Paul, Will's son, used to do, he used to make it a point that all the youngsters who joined Manchester United, he used to get them in one room and explain to them the history of Manchester United. That was part of Paul's job at Old Trafford. It was a main point. And another thing that he tried his best to keep was the United badge. Paul even made a dossier which he presented to the directors about the history of the badge on the Blazers. Because unfortunately, the way I see it, every year, this fantastic badge, which is so nice, is getting smaller and smaller. And I think it's a pity that that badge has not remained on the Blazers.
I know a lot of fans would say they really want Manchester United to have the words football club back on the badge. Do you think perhaps, without getting too controversial, maybe we've got an opportunity now to go back and bring some of these things back to the football club?
Who knows, who knows? I mean, I think if you talk to any United supporter, they always agree that that badge was a fantastic image of the club, and it was represented by all the players.
One of the things you mentioned there about Paul McGuinness talking about the history of the football club, moving on to Sir Alex Ferguson, we can come back to the others in a minute, but I always felt that one of Fergie's great strengths was he always made sure that when he brought new players to the football club, they knew the history of the football club, they knew what they were playing for. And in my mind, that's one of the things that made him so great. That's part of his formula.
Yes, it was, but it was inherited from Paul. Paul, I mean, over here, there's one of us who just arrived, who is today an integral part of the youth system, Dave Bushell. Welcome, Dave. But Paul, as far as I know, he always made it a point that every player who joined the club should know the history of Man United. And that was great.
I think that's one of the great things about you, though, Joe, because you know you've seen Manchester United Football Club evolve, and you've seen the great times, and you've seen how it's all happened and how the football club has all worked together and all this great history. So it must be quite hard for you to see the fact that we've not done so well in recent years, and you probably the man that maybe they should be speaking to remind them where we're going wrong.
First of all, I have to say that I am not anti-Glazers. I am not anti-Glazers at all. And I think all these green and yellow flags are for nothing, for one simple reason. Because they bought the club, and the club belongs to them. And nobody can come and tell me, in your house, move out, because it's your house. What I don't agree is the way that the club has been run. Because the Glazers, for me, made a massive success on the commercial side. We continue to get big sponsorships, but on the football field, I'm sorry to say, they did not know anything about football. They still don't know anything. And I hope the new bloke that has joined now will alter a bit the situation. Because they also employed people like Woodward, a nice bloke, but football-wise, he knew nothing. And unless you get people who have been in the game for a long time, I mean, you've got no success. I mean, one time I was talking to Robbo, and he was telling me, even when you sign players, when he was at Middlesbrough as manager, he told me, when you send somebody who does not know anything, how can you impress players to join you? He told me, when I was at Middlesbrough as a manager, I used to go and speak to the players, because they have to listen to the manager, the way he plays, the way he sees you in the future of his plans. So a professional person went to talk to a player, not somebody who does not know anything about football. And that's why I don't agree on that point where the Glazers were concerned.
The thing is that you've seen history repeat itself. We waited 26 years after Busby to win the Premier League, the top league again, and we don't know how long we're going to have to wait this time around. But I'm wondering, how hard was it, because you were here, for people like Frank O'Farrell?
After Wilf McGuinness, I think it was O'Farrell who arrived, am I right? With O'Farrell, I don't have a lot of comments, for the simple reason that for me, he was a very nice bloke, but very conservative. Very conservative. I found it very hard to communicate with him, where he was a totally different character to his successor, who was Tommy Dock. But when Tommy Dock arrived, the picture changed, for the one simple reason, because he played Manchester United way, attacking football, with Steve Coppell and Gordon on one side, the defense marshaled by a great player by the name of Martin Buchan, So that was a good setup. And I feel and think that if Tommy Dock at the end had not finished with domestic problems, he would have made a great success at Old Trafford. That episode of his domestic problems got me personally a very great lot of problems in Malta.
Really? Tell us more.
For the simple reason that I used to live in a big house, and I used to accommodate a lot of people, friends of mine over there. And at that time that it happened, I had some people staying with me. And one of them came on the Sunday morning, and he showed me the papers, where Tommy Dock left his wife and on with Gloria Brown's wife, the physio. And then I said, we're going to have problems. Because there were people staying with me who were involved in the saga.
Okay. You're close to it.
Very, very close to it. And oh, yeah, okay. After 2 days, a person by the name of John Maddox, who was one of the main reporters,
Sports editor of the Sunday People, I remember him, yeah.
who gave me a ring at home. And my ex-wife answered the phone. And I was still working with the local government. And she told me, listen, John phoned and he wants our address. And I told her, all right, just because he knew the situation.
Okay.
Because this person, John Maddox, when Tommy Dock joined Man United, they were so close that they say that the discussions for Tommy Dock to join Old Trafford were held at John Maddox's house in Sale. So still, and I phoned Maddox and I told him, listen, why do you want my phone number? Because we exchange Christmas cards every year. Oh, he told me nothing, I just want to know. Still, that passed. 2 days later, a knock on the door of my house, 2 pressmen. He sent 2 pressmen from England to fetch one of the people staying at my house as an individual, and he wanted the story of what was going on at that time. And I told the person, I told him, we've got 2 choices now. Either you go and hide yourself upstairs and don't appear till these 2 people leave, or else you go and face them and deny everything. Which the person concerned, because I have to tell you whether it's a he or a she.
Yeah. You go doing a bit of
So
action.
I have to pay attention. So listen, at the end we decided to face them. And the funny thing about it that I had no pool at home. And so I used to send them to a hotel, which used to belong to a friend of mine. And the funny thing about it, these 2 pressmen went to use the pool, and they began talking to these people concerned, and they did not know they were talking to the person who they were after. So at the end, by the time we had Jimmy and Brian Greenoff as our guests in Malta for the club, and we went to a barbecue, and they came and they faced this particular person. And at the end, Brian Greenoff went over to them. He told them, listen, what you wanted to know, you got it, so leave her alone, or else you have problems with me. You get what we call a Manchester kiss. So then they left. They got nothing out of this person. So they came to me. He told me, you know everything. You have to give me a story. And for that, you got 60 grand, which at that time was good money. And in the long run, I told him, listen, I'm not interested, and I don't know anything, you know. So after everybody left, I phoned this bloke, John Maddox. He told me, Joe, I had to do it. because at that time Maxwell had taken over the paper, and I wanted to impress myself so that I get a promotion. But that shows you the press. He was a very close friend of Tommy Dock, very, very close to Tommy Dock. He was very, very, very close to me, but where he was concerned, he did not give a damn about us. And after a while, I saw this bloke by chance in the lounge of Alex Ferguson, and I told him, Alex at that time, don't trust this bugger. And what happened, after a week that I told him so, he took a job at Man City.
You're still talking about John Maddox?
Yes.
Okay, crikey. It's a small world. I mean, I didn't even know you were going to mention John Maddox, but John Maddox was the first person that ever offered me a job in newspapers. I was only a teenager. He gave me a job as a runner, but I knew because he was very friendly with my dad, who was working for the BBC.
He used to live at the Avenue in Sale, next to Harry Gregg.
Alex let me live there at one point as well.
It was a sort of an area in Manchester where a lot of players used to live.
So I haven't got 60 grand to offer you, but are you going to finally give this scoop about who you were protecting, or are people supposed to work it out from what you've already told us?
No, I was protecting friends of mine who were staying with me.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, money don't count where respect is concerned. And at the end of the day, what's 60 grand? You won't swap it for being too close to Manchester United.
As fans, Joe, we're always struggling to get tickets. It's a nightmare sometimes when the big games are on. But I know you've got a story to tell us about the '68 Cup final.
Oh yes, great story. When we reached the final, our contacts with Les Olive were fantastic. And you won't believe me when I say that he allocated to me, not to me personally, but to our club, 50 tickets. Can you imagine the club today offering you 50 tickets? It's impossible today to even manage it, you know. So a lot of people came to Malta. So the tickets were distributed very, very fairly. But outside Wembley, I had one spare ticket, which I did not give to anybody, you know. And there was this little lad with no ticket. And I told him, here's a ticket. He told me how much I owe you. I told him, you don't owe me anything. I told him, you come in on one condition. You have to accompany me, because I did not want him to go back and sell it to the spiffs. Which he did. We shook hands, and he vanished. Never saw him again, you know. And 25 years later, the Association of Former Players, United Players, organized a celebration dinner at Mottram Hall, which I came from Malta with a few people, and it was a great occasion. And one of us went to the loo. And when he went to the loo, there was this bloke who began chatting to him. And he told him, do you know that when I was young, he told him 8 years of age, I went to Wembley and I had no ticket. He told him, and the Maltese bloke gave me a ticket free. And it happened to be the same person that I gave the ticket, which I did not know, never saw him. His name was Joe Muskie, M-A-S-K-E-Y. And he became then a businessman from Macclesfield. And the story was published even in the Manchester Sport in 1993. It's a pity that after a while I've lost contact with him, but it shows you that some people, when you do favors, and especially in the football environment, they don't forget it easily. Because in football you get a lot of negative comments. But the game is so great that it also gives opportunities to normal supporters to do good deeds. That was great. I don't know what happened to him, because it would be a pleasure to meet him again. His name was Joe Muskie, M-A-S-K-E-Y, and he used to reside in Macclesfield.
So if you're watching Joe MUSC, get in touch. Joe Glanville wants to speak to you again. As we said at the beginning, you're a legend, Joe, and it's a fantastic story, and it's all part of being part of the big red family, and it gets bigger and bigger. Let's go back to the managers, and we were going to talk about Big Ron.
Big Ron, he had a unique character of his own, always bubbly, and he gave me a lot of space in Carrington. That's why, as I said, I had become very, very close to Eric Harrison and Brian Whitehouse, because they arrived at Man United through Ron Atkinson. And all I've got to say about Ron Atkinson, he was a fantastic bloke to me personally, and he always helped me in everything that I used to ask of him. So, full marks to Ron, Big Ron.
Sounds like you should have had an office here, Joe. You spent so much time here, and they all obviously treat you with so much respect.
No, it was a case also that with us taking players to Malta and officials, they used to come back with positive comments about us. So it was a case of they used to trust me, knowing that whenever United needed something, I was always there for them.
It's always a benefit as well, like going to Malta is a nice place to go, isn't it? So I'm sure that you got a lot of good friendships with players because they were keen to go over to Malta.
You know, at that time when they have their summer breaks, today it's Dubai, the States, and at that time Malta was very attractive to them, you know, not a lot these days, you know. Although Mr. Bushell is a frequent visitor to our country.
He's a frequent flyer. Let's move on to another big one, Sir Alex Ferguson. How did things change when he took charge?
The first time I saw him, I used, up to a month before Fergie arrived, I came to Manchester, and I was here for 2 years because of the slot. And I said, how am I going to speak to this person? And I said, I have to face him. So he was with, at that time, Archie Knox. And my first talks about these two, they said, they definitely they come from the Goebbels. And it turned out that Fergie was very, very, very nice to me. And I had a good impression. And I just told him, listen, I've been coming here since the mid-60s. Would you mind if I continue to come? And he told me, no problem. And the connections got closer and closer because a year after, he came to Malta for a holiday. At that time, his wife was not well, and he got her for a break in Malta. And I used to remember that his children were still small, and they were a handful, the children. And they used to play in the middle of the road football. And with them came a person who was here at that time in the youth section. His name was Kieran Toyle. He was their mate, and Alex brought him with them so that they could have a good rest, you know. So that began the connections with Alex Ferguson, which up to this very, very, very day is very close. Unfortunately, I used to be very close to his brother Martin. I'm saying unfortunately because today he's not well. I mean, and I became really an unofficial part of his family because I used to be invited in his lounge after every game. Every time we won a Premier League, we used to organize the dressing room and have a party with his family, you know. We used to use the kit, aluminium, where they used to take it away with the jersey and whatnot, as our fridge. Okay. Ice, champagne, and he's a great man. I mean, there's no need for me to continue what he has done to football, because he's the one and only manager who won so many trophies. And I think that's enough to say about Fergie to describe his success in football. With his brother Martin, I was very close when he was a scout over here. And he used to travel a lot to Italy. And at that time, they had a bloke who used to look after the interests of United in Italy. He went to Italy to live because he was a rugby coach, and he went over to Italy to train a team over there in the initial stages when rugby was introduced to Italy. So the name of this bloke, we used to call him Williams. And in fact, the last time we came, we met Williams at Old Trafford because he still remains a good friend of Fergie. And when we used to go to Italy, we used to have big discussions about transfers. And I remember well that Martin used to follow 3 great players in Italy. He wanted them to join Manchester United. One of them was a great fullback by the name of Thuram. He used to play for Parma. And this Williams used to know them very well because he lived in Parma. And there was the goalkeeper, Buffon. He was in the very early stage. And there was a great centre forward at Fiorentina. His name was Batistuta. And Batistuta used to say to Martin, "But why you don't want to sign me?" And the other two, Martin had the idea of trying to impress him and bring him to Manchester, to Old Trafford, to see the setup. Now, Buffon at the early stages used to do everything where his parents used to be with him, every time. And we came up with the idea, so that they don't know him and the parents are coming to Manchester, that first we fly them to Malta, as if they are going for a holiday, and then I booked them flight from Malta to Manchester, you know. But at the end, I think, I have to say it, no agreement was made because the funds were not available. But I think they were 3 great players, these 2 people. Buffon, who had a later career with Juventus. Thuram was a very an integral part of the French national side. And Batistuta also was a great centre forward with his national country. I think it was Argentina, if I remember well.
It's interesting hearing you talk about Martin Ferguson, because a lot of people don't know about him, but I went up to Scotland and interviewed with him when I was doing a documentary about Paddy Crerand, and when you get him on the phone, it sounds like you're talking to Fergie, but he's got a totally different character. He's very super friendly. I know Fergie is friendly to his friends, but it's interesting to hear what a role that he had, because obviously you got to know these sorts of people. So what was the relationship like between Martin Ferguson and Sir Alex? How much influence do you think he had on bringing players here?
He had, because, I mean, he used to report, and most of the transfers that were made at that time, he was the chief scout. So he must have had some influence, you know. But with Fergie, I mean, Fergie always pretended that he is a Frank Sinatra.
Good singer.
I mean, always singing in the corridors of the dressing room. And he used to phone me in Malta singing. And then he used to, so that I won't know, he used to try and put a different accent. And for him it was very difficult to put a different accent. So he used to phone quite a lot to Malta, Fergie. I mean, a great friend. I mean, and he's a totally different character when you know him personally to what a lot of people, the reputation, because they see him on the football field, where he is a totally different person.
People think of Fergie, they think of the hairdryer, but I have seen a softer side to him, so I know he does have it. But he doesn't show it very often, but obviously you're a close friend, so you'd see a totally different side of him.
And people don't know he does a lot of charity. Lots of charity.
A lot of things that he's done in the past that people will probably find out about in the future. Great things. I know he looked after Kath.
Oh, Kath will treat her in another episode. And just not to continue, but one thing I always tell Kath, if you wanted to be a millionaire, you are the person that will be a billionaire, because what you know about every single person in the training center and the stories you would tell, you would definitely become a bestseller and you would be a millionaire by the next day, you know. And I mean, every time, from the first day I met Kath, and they asked her something, there were always two answers. Don't ask, or I don't know. And that gives you a proof why Fergie trusts Kath so much.
That sounds like a taster of something that we're going to talk about later in the series, but when people ask me about who's Joe Glanville, one of the things I always say to them is, remember when we waited 26 years for United to win the title? There's this great shot of Alex Ferguson walking through the crowd, and on his shoulder, the young Joe Glanville.
Yeah, what happened there, you remember we won the first league, Premier League, and we had to play the last game against Blackburn. So I phoned him to congratulate him, and he told me, next morning, come over home and we'll have breakfast together in Wilmslow, and then we'll go to the ground together. And we went, he prepared champagne breakfast, and we stayed chatting, and then we went together to Old Trafford. And as soon as we arrived, we got surrounded by everybody, all the supporters, trying to get hold of him, and them at the back trying to to wave the supporters back. And in fact, that incident was viewed on the television. And everybody tells me, and because they still show it, and I saw you with Fergie going to Old Trafford.
Absolutely fantastic. One of the people we haven't mentioned that I wanted to mention, because you got to know a lot of the younger players when they were coming through the cliff, and before they were established, they'd go to Malta and you get to know them. And I know you got invited to some special occasions, like, for example, David Beckham. I think, am I right in saying you went to his wedding?
Yes. I went to his wedding. The president of the club also was with me, Joe, and another 4 people whom he met in Malta when he was very young. Because Dave came, first of all, how I met him. I got my mother to London to have an operation at the Royal Ormond Hospital, and while I'm there, I managed to escape. And I phoned Fergie, they were playing West Ham, and I told him, have you got a spare ticket for me? He told me, no problem. He told me, come up to our hotel and have breakfast with us, and then we'll go to the game with the coach. And while I was there, he told me, I want a favor from you. He told me, I want to sign this youngster from London. He told me, and there's going to be his parents. Would you mind if you look after them? He told me he's a Mad United supporter. His father is a Mad United supporter, but the history of the family is Tottenham Hotspur. And his grandfather had season tickets at Tottenham, you know. And I met his parents, and from the very first day we hit it. And we remained friends up to this very day. In fact, last year, his mother, Sandra, was in Malta again. And for my daughter's wedding, all the family were present for the wedding, you know. So we've been in good relationship with David. And I remember for this West Ham game, David was a fanatic of Robbo. And every time he used to come to the club, every single photo of Robbo, he used to nick it. He used to finish with about 50 photos of Robson over there, you know. And the first game, the West Ham game, Fergie gave him one of these big honorex of the coaches. And from the stands, all you could see walking was an honorex. He was so young, you know. But I mean, a few good stories about Bex. Fantastic person. For me, although today he's a well-renowned figure, deep down he's still the same. He's the same old David who who always looked after the supporters. And I've never seen David not stopping to have a photo with the supporters and or else don't sign an autograph. In fact, he looked so much at the supporters that when Fergie signed Teddy Sheringham, he came to me, he told me, do you know what Fergie did to me? He told me he took my number. He took number 10 of me, you know, and he gave it to Teddy Sheringham. He told me, do you know what worries me? He told me, I know so many people, young supporters, who's got the jersey with the number 10, and now I don't know if they can afford it to buy a jersey with my number on, you know. And that shows you how much he used to look after the supporters, you know. Great character, great character.
Absolutely. I remember a game away at Ipswich. It was the first time Ipswich had played in the Premier League, and David Beckham, it was a midweek game, and David Beckham scored the goal. It was a draw. And every single Manchester United player walked past the fans, the Ipswich fans, to get on the coach. And the only one player who stopped was David Beckham. He didn't leave until he signed every single person's autograph. And they all said, we booed you to win the match, but now we love you. So he's always had that, hasn't he, David?
There's David. There's the image of David. He always lets the supporters down. Because he used to be a supporter. So he knows how the people feel towards the club. And even his father. Because David, his father, was his mentor when he was young. And his father educated him a lot the United way.
He brought him up properly, didn't he? So I think before we finish this episode, because I think we've overrun, we always go into a bit of extra time. Just give us your views on the transition from here at the Cliff to Carrington. That was obviously a big change, wasn't it?
Big change. And it happened that when he took the stuff to show them Carrington, I finished with them. I happened to be by chance. And Kath told me, come over and see the setup in Carrington, you know. Big difference, you know. The situation as regards football ground, it changed a lot. And the way football is run today, you know, you had to have space, you had to have an academy of the greatest standards, you know. So the Cliff became too small to run a club as big as Man United, you know. And also, how the world changed. Bombs being planted here, there, and everywhere, you know. So they had to have security. Unfortunately, the world has changed. And in fact, today, Carrington, there's a lot of security. The only thing that annoys me a bit is that to reach Carrington, you have to pass 3 barricades. And I don't blame them, because, as we said before, you know. But it annoys me when you see kids in the cold weather at the end of the road, waiting for the players when they pass, either for an autograph, and many times the players don't stop. That annoys me a lot, you know. Because at the end of the day, if it wasn't for the supporters who adore the team, and they pay day in, day out to go and watch them, where do their wages come from?
The game's changed a lot. I'm just wondering what it was like back in the day when you used to be here at the Cliff. Did you get a lot of fans turning up, or was it the game just a bit more low profile in those days?
No, over here it was open to all. It was open to all. At the swinging door at the Cliff, there were no security, nobody. Everybody used to go around the pitch and watch them, you know. I mean, there no security at all, and the players were very, very close to the supporters, you know. But again, as I said, the world has changed, and security became a must. Not just in football, but in every sector of life, you know. So.
But coming back today brings back a lot of memories, doesn't it?
Yes. It brings a lot of memories, you know. And it's been my life. So.
Joe, it's been absolutely fascinating, as we knew it would be, to hear you speak about your love affair with Manchester United Football Club. And as we said at the beginning, this is the first of a 4-part series chronicling the history of Joe Glanville, the former president of the world's oldest Manchester United supporters club.
I'm not young anymore. And if it isn't for their help, I wouldn't be here. So I thank them all.
Thanks, Joe. We loved it. Thank you.